Lonesome Lands podcast, Lonesome Report um, edition. I guess I used to separate these because I interviewed people, and now all it is me and Shad talking. But I'll get back to interviewing people. April 23rd, day after Earth Day. Did you celebrate Earth Day, Shad?
Yes, I did. I burned a tire in celebration of Earth Day.
And see, that goes right into what I've been thinking about. It goes into like we keep hearing agriculture are the original environmentalists and we're the conservationists and all of this stuff. But the whole environmental movement that's been taken over by the
Hijacked.
climate. Yeah, exactly. Like Earth Day should be, I mean, it's always kind of been a roll your eyes like, oh, I don't know. For I guess me, I guess, just because it's like the environment, I guess the environment as a whole has been hijacked by people who want to control how you act and operate and all this stuff. One thing I was thinking about, there was a during the carbon pipeline deal in South Dakota, like when it first started off, there was this legislator, and I was looking for it this morning. He did a speech and he talked about what he loved about agriculture is that there was truth in it. This has really come up as I've been looking into this stuff that we're going to talk about here because to me, thinking about, you talk about digging post holes and watching things grow and, growing food and there's truth in that. And there's truth in that kind of a business. But as we're looking into this stuff, and it's almost like everything we're going to talk about today, I don't know that there's truth in it anymore. Like
Well, there,
agriculture as an industry.
well,
It,
there's truth in independence, right? There's truth in
exactly.
independent agriculture, but there is not truth in the godless people who really their God is the climate, right? And they know, I mean, they know the truth because God gives us the truth.
But it's
But
it's more than that because it's people, it's just money. Give us money. Give us money, money, money. Like what we talked about last year, or last week, and we'll get a little more into it. The Food Ag Climate Alliance. And I was kind of just skimming through that again this morning, and it's always robust funding. We want robust funding.
yep.
Give us money, give us money, give us money. And that is what, like I've talked about before, if you read an article on agriculture, or a lot of times even my videos, if they get popular, a lot of people watch them, I'll get comments, oh, you guys are just cashing subsidy checks. Even no matter what it's about, if it's about cattle or anything, like the general public, it looks at agriculture as just kind of money grubbing. I guess I shouldn't say that the general public, but there is a segment that looks at agriculture as just begging for money from the government. And it's hard to say that they're wrong when you start looking into these things. I mean, agriculture as an industry is on the government's tit. Industry wise, like the lobbyists are just constantly begging, begging, begging for more money. And that's kind of what we're getting into.
But
I guess,
what
is there
they've
truth
done,
anymore? Is there truth in agriculture anymore?
right? And what they've done is they want to monetize these um, natural resources, right? And so they've interwoven that into the climate hysteria, partnered up with the agriculture industry, and it doesn't matter what country you're in. We talk about USDA in this country. Well, we've seen what they did, in that partnership, false partnership, in the European Union. So it's about monetizing these natural resources and who's going to have control of the natural resources. And they can do that by creating money that flows over to their side. Ultimately, we're going to talk about that today. This this money that they print to push into agriculture usually does not go 100% to a food producer or provider,
Yeah, and
right?
that's where you get
It's the
to
third
the
party.
money. Yeah, the people begging for money aren't the farmers and ranchers,
That's right.
but it's the industry
That's
as a
right.
whole, and it makes farmers and ranchers look like they're constantly wanting to be on the government's tit, as I said.
Right.
Um, but yeah, and it goes into all this stuff like the carbon pipeline, the windmills, the solar panels, all of these
Yep.
things. And you talk about Earth Day, and then you drive through rural America now that's getting covered up with windmills and solar panels and all of this stuff. And it just, there's no truth in that. You know what I
No.
mean? And so
Yes.
that's just what I think about with, and like you said, jokingly, right? You didn't burn a tire, but it makes like Earth Day and all of this fraud and these scams and based on the climate, it makes people want to burn a tire. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Almost like people are so sick of this stuff getting crammed down their throat that they want to go the other way, which they shouldn't. But I mean, that's what it's causing. Um,
Absolutely.
it's like, just to hell with all of it, which it shouldn't be.
Well, because it's
Um,
based on a lie, and the true human condition understands that it's based on a lie, right?
Right, right. But
And
there
that's
are certain things like you know, I said I was a conservationist one time on here and you were like, "Oh no, you're not." But I mean we are. We want to conserve our resources, the earth's resources. But when you say that kind of stuff, it's been so co-opted that it's instantly like,
well,
"Oh,
you just said it. That's a great word, co-opted. You're exactly right. Because I thought all along we were conservationists, regenerative, farm to table, all of this. That's what I thought we all always were. But I come to find out we were not. We were not.
yeah." So let's just get into it. I guess Brooke Rollins update. She has canceled one of the biggest things I've talked about over the past year is the climate smart commodities. Tom Vilsack, Joe Biden, all of them put together this climate $3 billion for climate smart commodities. And I'll try to find what they're now going to call it.
They're calling it the Advanced Markets for Producers Initiative.
Yes,
That's the
which
new name.
I also dislike this program, but she came out and said, so the climate smart commodities was just, I've talked about 95 million going to Iowa Soybean Association, 90 million going to ADM, mainly 40 million going to Farm Journal. All of that stuff is through this climate smart commodity program. She has said that a minimum, and so this money was supposed to go to these outfits, and they were supposed to pay farmers and ranchers to do these climate smart practices. Um, and she said a minimum of 65% of federal funds must go to producers. So that's one of the changes they're making and putting
Right.
it under this because it is contracts. They can't, I guess. I think this is done by lawyers. Like, how can we do this and not get sued,
Well, I
completely
think
and
less than
constantly.
45% were going to producers initially, and the other um, was called an administrative fees, right? So
Yeah, which
those
and all of that is that's not shown anywhere,
no.
which it should be. I
Well, they
wonder,
are. That's one of the regulations under this. Her change on this is they had to be more transparent.
yeah. Grant recipients must have enrolled at least one producer as of December 31, 2024, which means that this programs have been out like a year over, I think a year and a half at that point. Um, and for them to say that, you have to assume that there are recipients that haven't enrolled a single producer. They just took the
Well,
money
sure. So let me ask
because,
you this while we're here. If Farm Journal got $40 million, who they're the recipients of the money under this rule, what are they going to what do they do? Cut a check to a farmer, a producer?
well, yeah, that's the whole trust in food program. They wanted people signing up for it. And like I said, I don't know what people got, and it wasn't clear. Nothing was clear about any of this stuff. But the trust in food, trust in beef, they wanted you to sign up for it. Um, At least that's how it was on their website. They didn't really explain it that well either. So it was almost kind of like, I don't know if they were gatekeeping a little bit, like they didn't want somebody like me signing up and and then talk about what a scam it was, or I don't know. I don't know how it worked, but like you said, it just isn't transparent. But grant recipients must have made a payment to at least one producer as of, oh, I already said that. Oh, they must have enrolled at least one producer and
Yeah,
made a payment.
right.
So maybe they had enrolled people and not paid them, and they just said that they were using the money for the program. Who knows? The whole deal's a
Yeah,
scam. I mean, going back to everything we said, but I suppose that legally they can't cancel it completely because of,
contracts.
yeah, they're under contract. But she
Well, I
did
think
say,
the whole idea was to end the DEI and the climate, the far left climate programs.
yeah,
Uh,
which each of these programs had, I forget what they called it, but like an inclusivity.
yeah,
They talked about how they were going to be inclusive
yeah,
and talked about race and all of that stuff in there,
yep.
who was
And
going
they
to
were,
be involved. And
and they all held the studying I've done is they all had to hold um, the three pillars of sustainability, which is environmental, economic, and society, right? And they had to uphold those three pillars. So, but that's DEI anyway, sustainable development through the United Nations.
yeah, one of the, um, like we've had some optimism for Brooke Rollins and what she's done. And I feel like here's her quote on this deal. The Partnerships for Climate Smart Commodities initiative was largely built to advance the Green New scam at the benefit of NGOs and not American farmers. The concerns of farmers took a backseat during the Biden administration. During the short time as secretary, I have heard directly from our farmers that many of the USDA partnerships are overburdened by red tape, have ambiguous goals, and require complex reporting that push farmers onto the sidelines. We are correcting these mistakes and directing our efforts to set our farmers up for an unprecedented era of prosperity.
Well, I
So,
hope she's right.
I mean, it gives you hope. Thinking about the last secretaries of ags, I don't know that any of them would have ever come out and been like, "This was built to advance the Green New scam at the benefit of NGOs and not American farmers." That's what we talked about. If we've talked about it over and over. These non-governmental organizations which exist simply to suck money out of the government.
That's right. And I hope that she understands that the public-private partnership is the foundational wheel driver of all of that, and that has to be acknowledged and dealt with in order to really rectify what's going on here in
Yeah,
truth.
that's what we'd like her to say, but it's a good start on that deal, right?
You bet. I think it's a great start, actually.
To go into the green new
I'm calling it
scam.
lipstick on a pig, bro.
Yeah, I mean renaming it. Yeah. They should have called it that instead of what they call it? American
Advanced Markets for
Marketing,
Producers Initiative.
Advanced Marketing. Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's still just a government scam, but they're under contract, so they gotta
Well,
honor
that's
some of
just
it.
it. I
It seems
think,
like they're trying
yeah,
to cancel as much of it as they can.
yeah. I think that's the key is they're under contract on a lot of it and they have to follow through. And but I will tell you this, there is a group out of Pennsylvania that received $50 million of that. It's called Sustainable PASA, PASA, Sustainable Ag. They got their termination notice because they were really pushing the three pillars of sustainable development, environmental, economic, and social justice through ESG or through DEI, ESG through DEI. And they did get theirs canceled. They had over 60 employees and they have, I don't know, six to 10 board members, and they got $50 million through that deal. They got theirs canceled. termination.
Did
However,
did you read, where did you read that?
yeah, um,
Because they're
I don't know.
quoted in this Farm Progress article about it.
Hmm.
And I feel like, to go back on Farm Progress, they are a London-based, they're owned by a London-based company. So I'm sure they hate all this stuff. And I think you can tell by the picture they put of Brooke Rollins in. It is one of the least flattering pictures I've ever seen of her.
Well,
And
they filed a lawsuit against the administration because of it.
this Pasa, or
Yep.
okay, yeah. And so yeah, but did it give a reason why they got theirs canceled? Was it they hadn't done one of those things that
The
she
way
said?
I understood it, it was because they were, I don't know, I can't tell you.
And I looked through that website where you can see how the funds were distributed. They're not included in there. But
Yeah.
there's so many. I mean, like I always said, Tyson has a news article how they got 160, I think, $1 million from that deal, Tyson Foods, and they're not
Uh,
listed in there either. So I don't know that that website is, I don't know. That's where I found the Farm Journal's $40 million.
right.
But I guess going on to the green news scam, you said you wanted to talk about World Economic Forum, which is probably
Yeah,
I don't
that's a
know if
big
that's
deal.
where it started or where it gets pushed into these corporations or what the deal
It's
is.
where it started. It didn't start here, but they're one of the foot soldiers to implement it across the world, right? Because they're a self-selected stakeholding group of non-governmental agency or non-governmental people that have chosen themselves to drive the economic and environmental and social justice policies of the world under Klaus Schwab's direction for 55 years, who, by the way, at the World Economic Forum, abruptly resigned his position this last weekend on rumors of financial improprieties.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And yep, he sure did. Him and his wife, Hilde,
I thought he's just retiring because he's old.
he's 87 years old. Oh, nice. He's
Oh,
87 years old. He stepped down abruptly. He had made a contract to step down at the end of 27, but he stepped down abruptly this weekend. The board of trustees had an emergency meeting over it, but an anonymous employee came forward and accused him of having uh, of creating financial improprieties through lavish vacations, massages, and other ordeals, whatever. I'm glad he's gone. However, at the same time, the man who is stepping up to take his position is a guy by the name of Peter Brabeck Letmath, and he's a Austrian. I would say he's a bad hombre. He is he was the CEO of Nestle. Now we know that the Nestle Corporation, is one of the most corrupt corporations in the world in terms of food products. They've been accused of so many bad things. One of which is stealing water from one of those underdeveloped countries in Africa, maybe Sudan, and stealing the water from them, uh,
for
and
a
then
factory
selling
or
that,
something?
yeah, to bottle, and then selling that bottled water back to those people. That's Nestle, and he's been anyway. This Peter guy, he has been the CEO of Nestle, but he is something about him that's all about the water, right? So he's the founder of the 2030 Water Resources Group, which is a public-private partnership utilized through the World Bank. Now, the World Bank, I've been preaching on the World Bank, has been had a lot of influence on this global war on beef, right? Which is the war on the charters of freedom, and they have inched their way into every aspect of society. I mean, everything from obviously banking to the school systems, and I think there's trouble coming with the World Bank. So, like, name one of those big corporate banks that are
Rabobank?
Wells Fargo, Rabobank, Wells Fargo. They're all a part of that world banking system. And recently, there's been a lot of Citibank, Wells Fargo. There's been a lot of quiet closings of those banks. And what they're doing is centralizing the banking system, right? And this guy is part of that. But he is on record of saying that water is not a human right. And he sits on the board at the Swiss Credit Corporation. He sits on the board at L'Oreal. Why would he sit on the? I thought that was a makeup company. Apparently not. And he sits on the board of ExxonMobil. So he's a very busy man.
It's
Very,
weird
very,
when you
yeah.
get into these corporations. It is, well, I don't know. It's hard to even wrap your head around it.
Well, it's very confusing. He's interwoven into everything, but the whole thing is he is, well, how do I say it? He's a collectivist, socialist beyond socialist, uh, more than that. But not a good, not a, I thought we couldn't get any worse than Klaus Schwab.
Well,
Obviously,
even
that's a lie.
the evil villain looking and
Oh,
sounding like
good grief.
and yeah, picking world leaders from Austria and Germany. I don't,
Yep,
you
that's
know,
right. That's right.
there's a lot of history there that I
There's a
guess we
lot of
don't need to
history
get
there,
into.
buddy. A lot of
Um,
history. So that's pretty big news deal. I think we need that bears watching, especially with their partnership with the United Nations as the two most influential climate, uh, green
yeah.
Green New
I mean,
Deal
it
pushing.
doesn't, we mainly talk about agriculture on here, and so World Economic Forum news might not seem like it, but you go to National Cattlemen's Beef Association, they have those pillars up
That's
that
right.
Shad's been talking about on their sustainability page. I'm pretty sure they're still there.
They got them
Um,
directly from these two organizations.
all of this stuff, yeah, and all the big ag corporations go to have been to the World Economic Forum, all that crap. I don't understand why a company would. I mean,
Well,
but it
which
goes into collusion. It is a
it is collusion. It's 100% collusion, and it is the very base foundation of what you talked about last week. At this food alliance, it's
yeah,
this is where it stems from. This is where it comes from. These partnerships.
yeah. Food Ag Climate Alliance. It's a climate alliance,
That's
Shad, not
right.
a food
Well,
alliance.
I thought it was Food and Agriculture Climate Alliance.
It is, but their
Oh,
goal, I mean, that's the whole thing. They collusion to save the world. What better reason for collusion? I mean, that is what going back to that's what Earth Day bring. I mean, it's what they've co-opted. Like, how can we collude to control everything and make ourselves more powerful?
well, you
What
have to
what
read.
better excuse than saving the world from
No
environmental
doubt.
destruction? It
You
just goes to,
remember what Jason Clay from the World Wildlife Fund said. If if these are pre-competitive issues, we must use collusion to address them. That's a direct quote from Jason Clay. I mean, they are not above any of this. I don't know much about collusion, but I don't think it's good.
well, what else do you know? I watched finally got around to listening to the Thomas Massie interview of with I want to is it Marshall? I think it's Winston Marshall.
Yeah,
I was thinking, is it Marshall Winston or Winston Marshall?
I listened to it.
Who's a Brit banjo player from Mumford and Sons. We've talked about him before.
Yeah, but he's in the United States, or at least he was during this
Yeah, he was
podcast.
talking about how he's I don't know, his immigrant status or whatever.
Yeah,
But there's one thing. I've been in the planner and I was in there till midnight last night
your
if
subdued
I'm not
attitude
making sense.
is regarding that. Yeah.
You're what?
Your subdued attitude shows that you've been in the planter for quite a while.
Well, in the planner or I guess I took east had to it rained a little bit, so I took a few days off. But then you're out there and then you got so much to do once you get home. So it's like
Yeah.
all overwhelming. But anyway, I listened to that while I was in there. And then I listened to it back this morning because what he does is explains lobbying.
Yep.
And what he really showed, he said he didn't even know it when he got into the House of Representatives. Thomas Massie's a representative out of Kentucky, and he said the way that you get on these committees, which the committee I always think of is the Ag Committee. The way you get on these committees is lobbyists give you hundreds of thousands of dollars um, that you have to pay into your party because the party. What are you laughing about?
Because you're right. I know exactly where you're going. It's hilarious. It
It,
sounds so preposterous
and
that
no,
nobody's going to believe you.
why don't people talk about this more?
I don't
If it's
know.
so well known, I mean, it's
I've
well
been
known in Congress, I guess.
I've been talking about it forever that we needed to end pay to play.
Right. But so to go back to the parties decide who's going to be on the committee because we have your minority and majority ag committees, depending on who's in power. And the way to get on those committees is you have to pay your dues. Yeah, he called it a rent.
He called it a rent.
Yeah. And the way you get money to get on those committees, he talked about he's on the transportation committee. So, lobbyists from like a concrete company or airline companies would, offer to write him checks to get on the certain committees or to stay on the certain committees. He talked about the most powerful one is the Ways and Means Committee because all corporations, it controls what's in the tax code, and all corporations are very interested in, these deductions and certain
Yep.
things that deal with the tax code. But as I'm listening to it, I'm just thinking about agriculture and like how much does it cost to get on the ag committee? And the other thing he talked about is once, a lobbyist cuts you a big fat check and with the idea that you're going to pay your dues into the Republican or Democrat Party and get onto the ag committee. And then what are you going to do? Like, let's say it's NCBA or National or the Meat Institute or one of these big these outfits that represent corporate beef. They write a check
Right.
to John Boozman out of Arkansas or somebody like that, and then he gets on the ag committee. Well, when mandatory country of origin labeling comes along, or when this EID bill comes along, or when any of that stuff comes along that they talk about in their committees, it has to get out of committee before they can vote on it.
Right.
What do you think they're going to do? Because if they want to stay on that committee, they have to do what the lobbyists who wrote them the checks want them to do. This is just, I mean, and how this isn't talked about more, and how he became a representative and just didn't understand it even then.
Well,
Like,
I
I
mean,
mean, I feel,
who would understand it till you're there,
well, I
right?
mean, it should be
Yeah,
the
because
whole
nobody talks
country
about
should
it.
be in an uproar
That's right.
over
I
how
mean,
this works.
I've been preaching for 15 years that we needed to end lobbying, and he explained it in a different way, which I loved. Was maybe we don't need to end lobbying, maybe we need to end the payment for lobbying, right?
Yeah,
And
that's what he said. He said because the whole thing, like going back to this climate smart commodity thing, or anything that the Food Ag Alliance, where they're just begging for robust funding.
right,
He said if we don't give away so much money, there wouldn't be this demand to come up here and influence us. That's
right.
a quote. Meaning, if there wasn't $3 billion given away in the ag climate smart commodity
Commodity
program,
program,
yeah, like
the
I mean,
Advanced Markets for Producers
right. So
Initiative.
like ADM pays whoever they, their lobbyist for DC. The DC lobbyist pays the person on the ag committee. The person on the ag committee gets in there. Although the climate smart commodity program didn't actually go through the Senate, but any of these programs and they funnel money like probably the Nature Conservancy has lobbyists in DC
Heck
that
yeah.
funnel, that's why they get $500 million a year um funnel back to them. It's crazy how what he really exposed in that interview and how it's not talked about more. Well, we all know there's problems with lobbyists and we complain about it forever, but that whole situation with these committees and buying your seat on them, um, I mean, the way he really broke it down, it was eye opening.
Well, if this is it, if the American lobby system of lobbying is not a what would you call it? A money laundering scheme? I don't know what would be a money
It's
laundering
not even
scheme.
laundering. I mean, it's out in the open. It's not being hidden, right? Because
That's a good
it's
point.
just the people that could talk about it or should be talking about it the most are the senators who are in on it. The Congress people that are in on it.
Yeah.
Like if you're Thomas Massie and you want to be on the ag committee because you think you represent agriculture much better than the people there, there's no way of doing it unless you go to a lobbyist and say, I need however many hundreds of thousands of dollars to get onto this, to pay my dues to get on this
Yeah.
committee, and I'm sure there's more to it than that, like being in line with the leadership of your party too, which he is not. You know what I mean?
Mm,
He's not gonna get in line the way, a lot of them will.
man, and I do
But
like
man,
Thomas
that you talk
Massey.
about transparency, we need to know how much that seat on the ag committee costs. And I suppose it's different for different people. Like they're not gonna kick Chuck Grassley off the ag committee.
Well, and like who gets to set that rate? Who
Well, I
gets to
suppose
set the
it's the
rate?
party.
Huh?
Yeah, and is it like a bidding war?
Yeah.
Like I want to
Is
be on
it
the ag committee. Does the leader of the party say, "Okay, well, you need to show
I
up with
mean,
more money than the next guy"?
picking members of the ag committee is a lot like what we're talking about in influence and lobbying. It is exactly what we're talking about. Because, if you're a freshman coming in, you probably have no influence in that unless you are pushing their personal, Thompson's personal agenda. If you agree with him on every level, you have a higher chance than if you disagree with him on one issue of getting on there. I don't know how all that works, but I probably wouldn't be on the ag committee. I don't think they'd let me.
You wouldn't be anywhere near anything up there. Way too honest, Chad. But the one example he gave was mandatory country of origin labeling. He said it was something he was for.
Yep.
If you're not familiar, we don't have a country of origin label that's mandated on beef or pork in the U.S. and probably other things. But that's the one we always talk about. And he was for it, and he said he got shot down by the Uniparty. And he said because these global corporations that control the food industry didn't want it, and that's where all of this comes together. And so I was looking. I tried to find the number of meat packing plants Cargill has globally. I couldn't find the number. They talk a lot about. I think they have 30 within the U.S. and Canada is what came up. So U.S. and Canada numbers came up, but they said Cargill itself operates in 70 different countries, which Cargill's pretty much involved in every aspect
Everything.
of agriculture. So that kind of gives you an idea, though, of how they see things. But then I went to Tyson Foods, and I couldn't find a number on Tyson Foods either. But I found their global page. Global Food Company is what they call themselves. They say we meet needs globally as one team, one Tyson. So if you're wondering why mandatory country origin labeling would be opposed by these lobbyists and these big corporations. They have Tyson Foods China, Tyson Foods Europe, Tyson Foods Malaysia, Tyson Foods Mexico, Tyson Foods Middle East, Tyson Foods Thailand.
Wow.
And so these are just regions of the world as far as Middle East and Europe.
Wow.
But like Tyson Foods China, one under that, one of the bullet points there is domestic meat production enterprise in the whole industry chain, from breeding and slaughtering to processing and distributing, and distribution, providing comprehensive solutions for chicken, cattle, and pigs. That's what they're doing in China. Um, and so when you look at all this kickback on tariffs and all this different, country of origin labeling, any of this stuff that would affect things globally, these corporations that are, you know, big time players with National Cattlemen's Beef Association
They're
and
partners. They're
yeah,
direct partners.
yeah, I mean National Cattlemen's Beef Association is the lobbyist representing Tyson Foods in Washington, D.C. And they don't want mandatory country of origin labeling. And they've gotten American producers, some American producers, to go along with that because of they just give them talking points and they go along with it. But when you look at think about that comprehensive solutions for chicken, cattle, and pigs in China, right there on their website, and Europe and Malaysia and all these pretty much every region of the world. Um, that's what you got to think about, and it all
Well, and
ties
then
back
that,
into what Thomas Massie was talking about as far as lobbying goes.
yeah. And then we find out this week that I've seen several articles. I haven't really dived into it, but where JBS was the largest contributor to the Trump campaign.
What?
Yeah.
I did not see that. Well, he got it. They got a ton of money during his last administration. And that COVID stuff, and I can't remember. We should look that up for next week. But yeah, I guess that's so we have four major meat packers. I just talked about two because they're U.S. based. The other two are based in Brazil, and one of them, JBS has plants all over the world. They're the biggest meat packer in the world. And Marfrig, I'm assuming the same, but it doesn't even matter because they're not even in the U.S. So they obviously aren't going to want Marfrig owns national beef. They're obviously not going to want a country of origin labeling when they're based out of Brazil. Um, so I didn't even talk about them, but I should, I guess. Speaking of Brazil, last week we talked about gene editing. Did you look anything up about that? Because I did.
I'm trying to get over this, what I'm reading here. Pilgrim's Pride, which is owned by JBS,
Right.
was the largest contributor to the inauguration, overseeing the January festivities this year, $5 million.
That's it. I
That's
figured they
it
paid way more for, I
for
guess, $5 million for
for
one
two
day.
hours.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Where are you reading that at? What's your source?
This
You
one
just
was,
Googled it?
yep, I just Googled it.
You typed what in? JBS.
I typed in JBS contributor to Trump campaign, um, and that came up. And then here's one. President Donald Trump's inaugural committee raised a record $239 million thanks to dozens of mega corporations that contributed to the fund. And we're talking mega corporations like um, Meta, Amazon, Target,
Yeah. Which I
things
mean,
like that. That's not surprising.
well, they were sitting behind him at the
Yeah,
inauguration. I mean, I
right.
suppose that's what talk about pay to play.
Yeah, they got
They
a
got
good
a
seat in the
seat.
house.
They got a seat with the family.
Yeah,
Um, all right. But yeah, to go into these Brazilian owned beef companies, and that's where I first heard about gene editing. Remember, I can't. I should have looked this up, but it was either Association or Certified Angus Beef, which I don't know what even the
it was
difference.
the Angus Association.
They wanted to do. They wanted policy to promote gene editing for heat tolerance. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just because I was looking up gene editing and one it said examples of gene editing in cattle. And so gene editing, I guess just to break it down, they monkey with the DNA
Yep.
to um create I mean it's just like genetic working with genetics and trying in your breeding program, but they are doing it with they're able to manipulate DNA in like embryo transfers and they're able to where something would take generations
Years.
in a breeding program,
Yeah,
they're able to do it very quickly.
with the
Um,
needle.
yeah. And some examples of what they've done. The one is heat tolerance, and that bothered a lot of people because promoting a gene editing for heat tolerance in South America would give South America, like we've in the US, we've spent these generations creating the highest quality beef in the world,
Yeah.
and now they want to take this gene edit and just send it to South America so that all of our generations of hard work, well, then they can just have the same genetics we have in their climate by using gene editing, which they're not able to do now. And they talk about the heat tolerance. It's used to introduce a slick coat gene, improving heat tolerance in cattle. Some of the other things, bovine viral diarrhea virus. They have created the first gene-edited calf resistance to BVDV. Hornless cattle, which we have a major problem with here in the U.S., right? All our cattle, we got to get rid of their horns.
I thought we we
I
did
mean,
that
yeah.
generations ago.
Where are you finding that? But it says they have created naturally hornless cattle by activating the gene responsible for horn growth. So it kind of, this all goes back into the global deal. But then increase muscle yield, increase lean muscle mass in cattle, tuberculosis resistance. But the reason we're talking about this is because last week it came out, Farm Bureau, National Cattlemen's Beef Association, a number of groups are,
23.
yeah, I think it was actually more, but 23 main groups, in Farm Journal, Environmental Defense Fund, Nature Conservancy, all came out and for this
Ducks Unlimited.
food ag climate alliance, and one of the things they wanted to do was create government funding, I believe, in as part of the new farm bill to create use gene editing to create to make cattle have more meat on them so we don't need as many cattle.
Right. That's
Um,
right.
and so that's why we're talking about that.
Produce more
But
with smaller numbers. And once we get smaller numbers, we get smaller farms, numbers of farms and ranches. And instead of spreading the food system out like we should be working on after COVID, we're further centralizing it. And those guys, those organizations are totally 100% complicit in helping you go away from your ranch.
right.
And that's the end goal of this is, they've bought into the climate change lie. And
I don't know that they've even bought into it. I think they just use it. Like they know if they want to create a do gene editing, they want the government to fund it. What better way of doing it? This was promoted in 2023. What better way of doing it than slapping the word climate change on it to save the
no,
environment? And that
exactly.
is what we've talked about this whole episode. Like that is what the environmental movement has come into. Like if you
Yep.
want to do something and control an industry, slap the word climate change on it and you're going to get government funding. That's how it
Yeah.
was for the last 4 years. And we're hoping
Maybe that'll change under
things are
this
changing.
administration.
Right.
And we have to, remind that alliance did put this 30-page paper together just as a proposal to the new farm bill, right?
It's not proposal. I mean, they're saying
It's their proposal.
exactly, but they're not proposing. They're not like, we would like to see this.
Yeah.
It's more like, this needs to happen. Or
Well,
not
yeah.
even that. It's like, it's almost demanding what the USDA should do.
Yeah.
If you read
Absolutely.
it,
But that's the way
like,
they work.
I mean, yeah. So
Well,
they
we
want,
are under new leadership at the USDA, and I will tell you, I don't know Secretary Rollins, but as a freedom fighter myself, I would think that you could hand this 30-page document to Secretary Rollins, no matter who is on there, and she would have enough integrity to throw it in the trash and say, "We're not doing this. All
right.
this is more climate stuff that we promised the American people we would get rid of on day one."
But what I feel like we need, the goal of talking about this, they could take this 30-page document, take the word climate all out of it, and put something else in there, right? To, what did they call it? Advancing marketing program. They could call it that. They'll shape shift however they need to just to keep this money flowing if they
Yeah.
think they have a plan. But just to give an example, I just clicked on this and here it's under credit. And there's, it's like you said, there's a 30-page document. I was scrolling through it. This is just a page I was on. But it says to raise the MSA, the FSA, Farm Service Association, micro loan program limit from 50,000 to 100,000. This
Yep.
increase would reflect increased costs associated with product input, land access, and especially emerging climate responsive practices. Um, and then they want raise the farm operating loan limit from 400,000 to 600,000. But it doesn't say we would like to see this. It says raise the FSA direct farm operating loan limit from 400,000 to 600,000. That's what they want done.
Yeah. And
Um,
then, a lot of talk in there of conservation through the NRCS. I read that whole document, and
yeah, it
it's a
gives you an
lot.
insight into how things work in DC though. And to go back into that lobbying, I mean, it all ties together. I just stumbled into something that you were going to talk about. I think you understand a lot better than me, but this gigantic scam that was going on in Canada.
Yeah.
I was talking about federal loans, farm loans. Like that's what it is, right?
Well, basically it is.
We have to
So
say allegedly. All of this is alleged.
allegedly, the Alberta Cattle Feeders Association has a program that their members participate in called the Feeders Association Loan Guarantee Program, and I'm sure that it is subsidized by the federal government, and this program was suspended back in March, and it was suspended pending investigation by the Alberta Agriculture and Irrigation Inspection and Investigation organization. Uh, and what happened is a whole bunch of fraud on every level, from the people who run this organization. They were defrauding everyone from the federal government to their own wives and grandmas,
Their
and this,
employees,
yeah, their
like they were using their
employees.
employees' names, and the
Yep,
employees had no idea that they were.
yep,
I saw one that he had taken out a $1.2 million loan in the name of his employee. The employee had no
yes,
idea.
that's right. The four main categories they said was they accepted ineligible members, they used the guaranteed loan program inappropriately, and they had an improper quantity of loan programs, and they obstructed provisional inspection. So, in other words, they were hiding all this from the provisional inspectors. I think the issue that's coming out of this that everybody's concerned about, especially in the United States, is the use of EID, RFID in terms of collateral, right? Instead of having the management of counting cattle individually and knowing the numbers, I think the concern here is that the EID, RFID tags can just be shipped to this facility, and these loan officers or these loan program people can use the number. I mean, it could turn very fraudulent. Could use the number of RFID, EID tags as leverage for the loan,
Well, it
right?
was
Well,
in an
that doesn't
article.
mean if you have a million RFID tags on hand, doesn't mean you have a million cattle to cover those loans.
Yeah.
And
Which
I
it was,
think that's what is the concern here.
yeah, it was quoted in the article. The RFID tag numbers are what we use as collateral to secure our loans,
Right.
is what one of the guys said. But then one of the guys who is the shooting, it's Kevin Surface and then there's this shooting who are both implicated kind of in this deal. But this shooting is, it says it, he Shooten believes that the option of using RFID tags instead of branding will benefit feeder associations.
Uh-huh.
If
Uh-huh.
branding is no longer a requirement to be part of a feeder co-op, feeder associations will gain business and new clients. And so this goes back to the branding bill in Nebraska. If branding is no longer a requirement to be part of, you know, Nebraska cattle feeding, um, to be a cattle feeder in Nebraska, it just gives opportunities for just tons of fraud.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, um, and that's kind of what that whole thing gets
And
back
they
to.
did, I mean, they had a list of like 20 20 types of fraud implications on in that article, and I was just like,
Yeah, it's almost too much to keep up with. And it's
it's so
Canada, so
much.
it's like everything's a little different. Like their feeder association,
Yeah,
all that stuff. Like I
yeah.
don't.
But it is a um, an example of what could happen if we go too far here. Because
Yeah.
I mean, let's face it, Canada is ahead of us in terms of socialism. Uh, but I think that's a big story up there, and I think that they have been reinstated, Jim. Um, that loan program has been reinstated, but I think there's a lot of fallout from that.
Yeah, that's gotta be a big deal.
Yeah.
What else you got?
What else you got, buddy? I got 7.5 inches of rain over the weekend. The creeks are running. The cattle are happy. It's cooled off. It's green as a gourd. Wildflowers are coming. Blue bonnets have popped up. Uh, the board is up a little. Cattle are still high. Uh, what else?
Did you see
Baby
that guy on
calves.
CNN say he's going broke in the cattle business because of Trump's tariffs?
Sure did. That was the
They've
dumbest thing I've ever
they
seen in my
searched and
life.
searched and searched to find a cattle producer, but I do like that they included. They made it so blatantly obvious. Like they were like, "Did you vote for him?" It's like, "No, no, I didn't." And he was talking how he didn't like Trump, and then she was like, "Well, how come all your neighbors did?" Like, how come you didn't go interview a neighbor? How come you just settled on this guy, CNN?
Well, I thought the dumbest thing that they could have said that he could have said was, "We're experiencing the futures are experiencing a downturn in the last couple of months," and I'm like, "What is he talking about? The last couple of months have seen the highest futures prices in the history of our business."
Right.
Unless I'm not watching the right futures market, I don't know. I get involved in that pretty heavily on a day-to-day basis, and I'm like, "What is he even saying?"
And
I
it
was
it
whatever.
also goes to CNN because I'm always thinking about them. Like, how hard is it for them to look up, okay, pre-tariff talk, what the price was, post-tariff
Yeah.
talk, what's the price was, you know, and just see, okay, this doesn't make any sense. But instead, they're like, okay, we found a guy who hates Trump. Let's go
Yeah.
interview him. But then it just exposes, like, here's why you shouldn't watch or believe anything you hear or see on CNN. If
I'm
it's
sure
like
that,
the, have you heard I can't remember, there's a name for it. Some guy came up with this thing where if you read or see something that you're really familiar with and it's completely wrong, you're like, oh, these people don't know what they're talking about. Like if you're watching CNN and you see that article and you know about the cattle futures and you're like, oh, these people don't know what they're talking about. And then another story comes up, about some other completely different topic, and you're like, oh, that's really interesting. You believe it because there is something in you that you believe things that you don't know anything
yeah,
about. But then when you
right.
see them, like and that is changing, I think. You have
Well,
to, people are realizing the source of this
yeah.
is is so blatantly false.
Well, I think it takes me back from the wisdom that my friend Jim Mundorf has given me over the years. Don't have a knee-jerk reaction, Shad.
Yeah. I mean, this goes to these tariffs. Like everybody on the first day they're announced, oh, this is terrible. Oh, this is
Listen, we haven't even had a chance for the tariffs to affect us yet,
right. Yeah.
right? Am I wrong on that?
No, I don't think anyone has any idea. I mean, that's my opinion.
Exactly.
But I mean, that's kind of how I operate. It's kind of like I don't know, maybe I'm just weird. Like this Douglas, have you seen the Rogan thing about, well, there you go to Thomas Massie. He had put up a picture of himself with this Dave Smith, who's an idiot. He's a comedian who's all anti-Israel. And,
Okay.
I don't know, but the whole thing, they had this debate with Douglas Murray and this Dave Smith, which one of they're like polar opposites, and it's kind of like everybody, you had to pick a side. Either you're all in on Israel or you're all anti-Israel to the point where you're almost like apologizing for horrible things that whatever. But it's kind of like, you know what? One of them, they both had some points here and there. They both seem like jackasses here and there. Why can't we watch it like that? That's how I watch it. coming
You
away.
mean
But you get into these issues and it pushes you. It's kind of like in ag, what we're seeing now is you're either all in on this regenerative thing where you don't feed, it's got to be all grass fed, it's got to be heavy rotation, and all that,
or you're a bad
or
guy?
you're, yeah, or you're a horrible person.
Yeah.
You're complete the other way,
Yeah.
where it's kind of like it all depends on climate and not the climate what we've been talking about,
Region,
your actual weather.
climate,
Yeah.
region, location,
Right.
markets. Hey, let's talk about maybe do what you feel free to do where you
And
can
what you think's
create a
best.
market.
Like, and that's the thing. One of the things I respect this Will Harris about, like he is very, this is how we should be doing things. He's a White Oak pasture guy. He's been
Yeah.
on Rogan and he's
Yeah.
kind of like a Joel Salatin, same kind of deal. But what's interesting about those guys is they're both in the Southeast. They're both from the same kind of region where
Yeah.
that works, You don't
Yep.
really have to hay in the winter, or I don't know
Yep.
how they do it, but they don't have these massive weather swings where you have to do things a little bit differently. We can't all operate like we live in Georgia or Kentucky or wherever the heck.
Exactly. Exactly. And I know there's people that argue about it with me. And, you know, when you are in an area of 9 inches of precipitation a year, you treat that totally different than you would where you have 40 inches a
Hmm.
year, right?
And one thing,
But,
what I was going to say about Will Harris that I respect him is he's almost like, I think the last time I heard him interviewed, he wasn't dissuading people from trying doing things the way he does it, but he's
uh-huh,
very aware, like he makes you realize, he goes, it is very hard
very
to
labor
do what he
intensive.
did. And like financially.
Oh,
He's like, we've almost been broke many times. Like, and to
yeah.
do this, you have to be set up the right way. And I think his goal is to, you know, create a system where it's not so hard, which is commendable. But I still, disagree with some of the things he says, and some of the things
Well,
he says is great, which
I
is
liked
what
it.
well, how it should be. Like, right? You shouldn't just see somebody like, I hate that guy or I like that guy. You should be able to be like, well, that guy's got some good points and some things
Well,
I
I
don't
liked it
think
when
really
Joel
make sense.
Salatin said, why don't we choose freedom? That's what
Yeah.
Joel Salatin said, and I
Yeah, he
like that.
makes some good political points, but
You know,
he's also kind of a goofball, I think.
I don't know him. I've never met him. Probably never will.
Oh yeah, I know. I don't either, but I think he would admit to being kind of a goofball. Nothing wrong being a goofball.
No, nothing wrong with it. I mean, I've been called. I wish somebody called me a goofball. It'd
I
be
am
kind of nice.
self-proclaimed goofball.
You're not a goofball. You're a
Um,
good man.
you got anything else? We hit it all, I think. I don't know how long we've been going. I'm bad at keeping track of that. Lonesome
What are you gonna do
history.
for history? Let's talk about a lonesome history, okay?
I would say I got a shirt right here I saw before we came in. I have t-shirts for sale on the website. Lonesome History brought to you by lonesomelands.com merch. Merchandise store. If you go to lonesomelands.com store, this is on sale, dedicated to the end of the plant-based industry.
Nobody can see that. All your
This is a bull. Well, I'm showing the burger. You got to be able to read it.
I see it.
This is what we in the art world call symbolism. That is
Okay.
a bull.
Okay, Van Gogh. This is a bull too,
BS. Yeah,
right
but
here.
this one is crapping out. This is called Plant-Based BS t-shirt and it's on sale for 19 bucks because
I like that.
I think the plant-based industry is about over and it was
Did you make
created.
that?
I had my nerd, Kurt Preister, shout out to Kurt. He drew this up. He helps me with all my technical stuff and he started out
Pretty good.
as a graphic designer. So I said, I want a bull crapping out a plant-based burger because it's BS, right? Symbolism. The
Good
whole,
job. That's
and
pretty
guess
cool.
what? I created that. It was probably 5 years ago. Now the whole dang industry is going belly up pretty much. You don't hear about it anymore. And remember that Impossible Foods guy who said within like 5 years, the cattle industry wouldn't exist because everything was going to be plant-based.
He's the one that was the keynote speaker at the 2023
No,
CattleCon.
that's not him. I'm
Oh,
talking
different
about the
guy.
Impossible Foods CEO. He had all these bold predictions, and the only reason they probably exist now, he did a bunch of school food contracts and crap like that to feed
And
that
all the kids
poison,
are starving to death.
feed that poison to our children. It was in California, I think.
Oh my
He
gosh, my
had
poor
school
kid
contracts.
comes home talking about that, how bad the
Yeah.
hamburger ground beef or the hamburgers at school are. He's like, Dad, I don't think that's beef. They have a funny, he says they look like a checkerboard. That's what my little kid says. He goes, it looks like a checkerboard. And I said, is it tough to eat? And he says, yeah, it feels like rubber. And
Yeah.
he says, I just can't eat it. And I'm like, well, maybe there's a large portion of it that is not meat. I don't know.
There's definitely a problem in schools. My daughter does. She makes her food. She meal preps, takes her
Does
lunch
she?
every day because it's
Wow.
garbage food.
Yeah.
And my son, he won't eat it either, but he doesn't take
Yeah.
much. I just don't think he don't eat. I don't know. Anyway,
Talk to us about the
Lonesome
Lonesome
History.
history.
I grabbed this book because we've talked so much. Should we say, so the mod case, if
Yeah.
we've talked about it kind
Got
of
a little
nonstop
update
for
on
three
that?
weeks. Yeah, go ahead. Whatever you want to say.
Oh, I just, after we all went up there, it was a great meeting. The legislative review is awesome. I think that there is motion taking place. I don't know exactly what it is, but I do know that Secretary Rollins has the information she needs to make a judgment on it. So I think that I feel like pretty good about it. But here's the thing that has brought it to light is so many other producers in other states are going through something very, very similar. And, a friend of mine, Kelly Goss in Southwest New Mexico, they actually met with Brooke Rollins on their issue in Lubbock last week. And it was the same exact issue. It's government, it's Forest Service overreach by these employees and just treading all over these producers. And this family bought like 127,000 acre allotment. And when they bought it, I can't tell you when they bought it, but probably say 20 years ago at least. Um, it had, their units on there was 500 head, and the Forest Service has them down to 120 head of cattle on this 127,000 acre allotment.
yeah.
And they say they look for every excuse. And so they actually got to meet with Rollins for a short period of time. And the Independent Cattlemen of North Dakota met with Brooke Rollins today up there at a meeting, and they were going to, get to
I band
um, IBAND, talk about their issues, and I think they were
Independent
going to,
Beef Association.
yeah, there you go. And they were going to talk about their issues along with maybe the mod case. So, I can't say much about the mod case because I don't know, but I do
Okay.
know that I'm
We've
still
heard.
cheering them on and we're praying for them
Yeah.
and
If we, I don't,
in
did
close
we,
touch.
I can't remember we said that their trial date, I'm pretty sure we talked about that, but it's been pushed back to July. So,
July 22nd. That's right.
and no, did they ever say why?
Nobody knows why.
Yeah. I don't know.
Somebody knows why, but not
But yeah,
not me.
that's the
Not
thing with
any of
that
us.
deal. The update on that is this is not a, I mean, there's been so many comments about Bundys and Hammonds, and this is not a new thing that has happened. And if, now, like a lot of different things, we feel like there's an opportunity to actually fix what's going on. Forest Service,
Exactly.
BLM, all of that kind of stuff. Um,
Exactly.
we should be working together instead of trying to,
Well, I think
them
we
trying to
are.
throw the ranchers in
I
prison.
think we are working together. What you have is the freedom fighters working together, right? That's
But
what
I've
this is
talked
all about.
to every rancher I've talked to, and I even talked to a BLM guy, a retired BLM guy, who
Uh-huh.
said there are good There are good BLM guys and there are bad ones. And I think it's probably the same in the Forest Service. You know, there's good guys who are there to try to help and do what they're supposed to, and there's jerks. So
Well, that's just the way it is in life. I mean,
yeah, I know,
there
but
are producers out there that are jerks, right? And they don't align with, the majority of producers. That's
and we
just
just
there's
talked
bad
about a
apples
con
in
man.
every, huh?
We just talked about a con man.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's bad apples in every basket. So there are good people at the Forest Service. And we know that, but the overzealousness has to end.
Yeah.
What about Lonesome History?
All right. Dakota Cowboy. We've been talking so much about South Dakota. I thought I would look up, see if I could find something. I didn't really have a ton of time, but I found one like interesting story. It doesn't really tie in that much, but it's just a cowboy story, I guess. This guy, Cowboy Ike Blasting Game. Not
Yeah,
what? Well,
Ike
Blasting
Glass.
Game, Tom Blasting Game, isn't it? The song?
That's Tom.
I
He
don't know if
worked for the
they're
JAs forever.
yeah. Well, he worked doesn't the song talk about how he worked all kinds of places? Or was
Yeah.
it just the JAs?
No, he worked all kinds of places, but he died on the JA. He got off of
Okay.
his horse and he lay down on the ground
Yeah.
and died.
That's the story. Tom Blasingame got up, he cowboyed till he couldn't anymore, got off his horse, laid down under a tree and died.
That's right.
Um, this is probably a cousin, Ike, but he cowboyed for the Matador. And what happened in the early 1900s, a lot of these um, big Texas cattle ranches leased land in Indian reservations. And this is the Cheyenne River, which I believe is a Sioux reservation, which is a little confusing there. Cheyenne River is the Sioux reservation, a Sioux reservation. Um, but yeah, so this whole book is about um, the Matador Ranch in Cheyenne River, Everts, North Dakota or South Dakota, which doesn't even exist anymore as a town. Um, but that's kind of where it's based at. And I just give you a little bit into how what it was like for these guys to cowboy ranch on the Cheyenne River. What's that? What book's that? Cattle
Great
Empire.
Plains Cattle Empire, the Thatcher brothers.
Oh,
I
so
just turned to that. Can you
whose
believe that?
ranch? So what was that ranch called?
Well, this was the Thatcher brothers who settled all of eastern Colorado
Okay, yeah,
in the
the Cheyenne
1860s.
River. It's a huge area, um, central north, and it goes into North Dakota,
Yeah.
central north central, South Dakota. But so it just goes. I'll just tell you, give you a little taste. In his letter to me, Jim Burr spoke of a contemplated change of range boss and said I was in line for it. Joe Lackey, who was range boss then, went to Canada and been sick before Dode was killed. The first attack had came after getting extremely hot fighting a prairie fire. He was sitting on his horse, watching the fire and resting, when suddenly he toppled to the ground in a sort of fit. In a sort of fit. The Matador sent him everywhere for doctoring, but he grew steadily worse. Finally, they took him home to Texas and put him in a hospital there, close to his people. It was Matador policy to take care of their employees and to pay their salary during illness. Pretty good, huh? Pretty nice of them. When I returned to Matador in South Dakota, I found that they had changed headquarters again to the Alexandria place, farther away from Everett's and Ambrose's place, where our second headquarters was. One day, a livery rig from Everett's drove into the yard, and who should step out of it, happy as a lark, but Joe Lackey. He wasn't the big, rugged man I had known, but he seemed well enough, and so happy to be back. He unloaded a fine new saddle, blankets, chaps. He had several hats, pants, and new boots, gloves, coats, and a good bedroll. He had saved his paychecks during his illness, so he had enough money to make one more effort at cowboy life. Until suddenly his old trouble attacked him again. The exertion had been too much, and he was stricken severely. We put him in bed, and Jim sent out to the wagon for Dick Holder, one of the cowboys, to come in and help care for Joe. Alec Landrio was a squaw man. That was probably going to get us canceled, but That's what they called people
I didn't
who.
say
This is a historic. This is what they called guys who had Indian wives.
That's right.
And his home was nearby. The Matador had taken over his big two-story log structure and built him a nice little home since his family was nearly all grown and married. Alec had suffered from an old injury for years. When he was young, he had been cutting down a tree. It didn't fall immediately, so he hit it once more, which caused it to bounce off the stump, and the jagged end landed squarely on Alec's toes.
Mm,
Finally, after all these years, he had to have his leg amputated at the knee. And at the time Joe became ill, there was a trained nurse with Alec continually. Jim Burr made arrangements for her to come over once a day and oversee Joe's care until his folks could come for him. So Joe was a cowboy, come down with this illness. They couldn't figure it out. He got better, came back to the ranch. But then he got sick again. In Texas, they had been searching everywhere for Joe. So Joe didn't tell his folks or anybody that he was going back to the ranch because it sounds like he kind of escaped the hospital
right.
and
Right.
everything. They had been searching everywhere for Joe until his brother thought of wiring Jim Burr and found out that sure enough, Joe had come to Dakota. When the brother arrived, he said gently, "You'll have to come back to the hospital, Joe." Joe broke down and cried like a baby. He begged to remain in Dakota, but in the end, he knew he must go back to Texas. I pulled his boots on his feet for him, and if there was ever a broken-hearted cowboy who realized he could no longer carry on, it was Joe. He had taken one last fling at cowboy life, but I think he knew when he left us that his days were numbered. He died shortly after he got back to Texas.
Mm.
Just a little peek into how guys operated back then. The guys who loved it, they loved it so much. If they couldn't do it, they give up pretty much. This is what it sounds like on him. And that's kind of a little story. I don't know if you noticed though, there was a cowboy in there, Dick Holder, one of the cowboys, to come in and help care for Joe.
Yeah.
But it kind of goes back to another name we talked about on here. People who name their kids Richard didn't really think about their last names much.
That story reminded me of my dad. And when my dad was dying, and he wouldn't give it up. I mean, every day I'd take him into the bathroom and he'd look in the mirror walking by and he'd go, "Man, if we can get through today, Shad, I think we got her licked." And about, I don't know, 4 or 5 days before he died, I put him in the pickup and I said, "Let's go look at some cattle." And we went down there and we had his old horse out with some old geldings there on another little ranch that we have. And he had just been riding that horse that spring. That horse's name was Boudreaux, and super nice little gelding. And God, I'll never forget that. My dad walked up to the fence. I got him out of the pickup. He was not in his right mind. Um, and he walked up to the fence. That horse just come up there and put his dadgum head on my dad's shoulder. And it was like it was the end. They both knew it was the end of something, right? And I'll never forget that day. It was very sad.
Yeah. I don't know how you talk about it. But horses know, I guess, a lot of
I
times.
guess. I
If
guess.
something ain't quite right, they seem to sense it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it might have been that he had his, when he got out of the pickup, he says, "I got to pee." And he pulled his pants clear down to his ankles and peed. And I'm like, "What are you doing?" And he didn't have a thought in his head of what he was doing. I mean, not
You don't
nothing.
go like that? That's how I do it every time.
Uh, fun times.
All
Fun
righty.
times on the rancho.
LonesomeLands.com. Click on subscribe. Adios. I wonder what Dick Holder's job was when he was taking care of Joe.
Oh.